Hi, Chris.
I think
Number one.
so. Let's just do a little check in here. We have Paul, Chris, Teresa, me. Not a quorum.
That is not a
right?
quorum.
Okay,
Paul,
which is
yeah.
all right. We don't necessarily need a quorum for today's business.
Hopefully we'll have someone hop in though.
Oh,
Yeah.
here's Peter, he's coming in, hold on. Let me get
Peter might put us over the top.
Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, that should do it.
Okay. All right, well, we'll call the meeting to order. As far as the agenda goes, the first item would be public participation. I'll ask now if James or Jessica wish to speak.
Hi, no, I'm just attending. I was curious to see what El Rapo is all about. And thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome.
Okay, thank you for stopping in then.
Let's,
Volume is
Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me?
We're having a little speaker issue. Give us a second here.
hold on, James. We'll get the get our audio on the speaker as opposed to our Heather, if you go to the, here, let me borrow the mouse.
Yeah.
Here. Are y'all hearing us okay?
Oh yeah, I can hear you folks just fine.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Well, it's coming just from the wrong speaker on our end.
Is that Travis that I see there?
Bottom?
Yes.
Yes,
Hi Travis, how are you?
I'm doing well. Hold on. It's not, yeah, it's just coming from the wrong speaker there, Heather.
How weird. I was thinking under the,
Oh, yes,
yeah.
you're right.
and for some reason,
Select a speaker.
Now I can't see you folks. I can see the logo of Larapa.
All right, well, bear with us.
No, it's fine. And so I'm very patient. I appreciate your time today.
For that.
I think that might have fixed it.
There we go.
Hey, okay, we can hear you now.
hey,
Wait, James, did you wish to speak?
Yeah, I just had a few things I wanted to mention.
Okay, before you dig in, I'll go through the rest of the agenda, then we'll get to your time. What's your time limit?
So what we have, so we'll do we got the order, we have public participation. Then that's when we'll have an opportunity to speak. It's traditionally has been about 3 minutes, but I think that we can, engage and see how that goes.
Yeah,
Then we'll have Ben for interview, go through the board overview, and then get into the CAC application form discussion.
round table and adjourn. Okay, so having gone through the agenda, hopefully you all heard that. So now we're ready. James, you have the floor for 3 minutes.
Yeah, it shouldn't take me more than a few minutes. Well, the main reason why I'm participating today is I've just been noticing that there's lack of citizen activity involved. There's only like 2 members of the committee that are actually citizens. And so I would definitely like to participate and be part of the committee. I know I was denied last year and got an email from Jim with the reasons and whatnot, and I'm not here to discuss that. I'm just actively here saying here I'm a member of the community. I'd love to be a part of this committee and add my expertise to this whole committee here. So that's basically why I'm here to say something today. So just kind of putting it out there. I haven't actually put an application back in, but I'm hoping that maybe this committee will get more people, like do an outreach campaign or something. I don't know how you would do it, but to get more people like myself that want to participate, because it just would be great. So, but yeah, that's why I'm here. So thank you for listening, and hope you guys have a good rest of your day.
All right, thank you. Okay, so our next item is an interview of Ben Larson, who's in the office with us right now. Yeah, we're doing it before board meeting overview. Okay, we have Evelina now, that's good. So Ben, I'll just kick off by saying, we're currently in the process of, reviewing our interview and application process. So you slipped in with the old application. And we haven't really honed our interviewing questions as we would like, but we will take you anytime. So just to describe this process, then the committee reports to the board of directors, and anything we do has to have their approval first.
Yeah.
So as far as participation of members in the committee, we can request that the board approve us to take on projects, or the board will assign projects. And sometimes there's kind of a period where we just do some education on LRAPA or other area issues lacking other projects.
Okay.
And then as far as the process for new members, then we do an interview like we're ready to start. And then the committee will vote to whether or not to refer your application to the board, and the board makes a final decision.
Gotcha. Yeah, that clears up the draft CAC application.
Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so would you like to start with just a self-introduction and a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Yeah. So I grew up in the Lane County area, Crestwell. And 11 years ago, converted the family farm from what was current or previously leased out to grassy to under our management, we were converting to a orchard and ranch and riparian forest. And so, yeah, that was while I was in high school. So I went off and spent my breaks doing that for a few years, and then moved back to do that full time in 2018. And so, yeah, been in charge of a lot of different project management and grant programs with that, as well as like personnel management and kind of like larger systems thinking. We have quite a few community connections that we've like partnered on lots of different projects with, and largely like research or restoration projects. And yeah, so I've just kind of dived right into the agricultural space, and more recently I've kind of shifted towards like wanting to provide like education. So I moved into like a teacher licensure program, so I can like bring my experience to like the greater community in that way. But still very much involved with the farm and its management, and kind of some like community partners that we work with as well.
And you're currently teaching math at the Crestwell High School?
Yeah, it's a 0.5 FTE though, so yeah.
So you don't see any problem being free to attend the monthly meeting?
I know I can make Tuesdays at noon work for at least until September, and at that point I am unsure of what my schedule is. I know I can like here and there get them off, but I might be trying to, see about a potential shift in the schedule if my schedule doesn't align.
Okay.
But generally I have lunch starting at noon, and so if I don't have a class right after that, then it's totally fine. But otherwise I might need to get a substitute, or I can make it work for the like next year or so, but longer term I might be interested.
We do have
in
the
shift.
virtual component too, which, like Misty Frost, who we haven't seen for a little while, but has joined us from her work kind of virtually. So that's an added flexibility as well.
Yeah, well, I'm being able to commit through September is significant. So would anybody have a question or? Give y'all a chance.
I think I'm good at the moment. That's why, sorry, I shut my screen down. I was reading the resume and the some of the paperwork that was turned in. So appreciate you doing that. It's good to see your detailed response. Thank you.
And I'll give the CAC a little bit of background though too on under our CAC, and not necessarily charter, but in our titles, I should say, is an agricultural representative is someone that the CAC reserves a chair for. And while LRAPA doesn't regulate agriculture under our titles, I think that the intent is because there is agricultural activities that is done that involves burning and other activities that can create smoke and put pollution into the air. And I think that that's where that engagement and way of having information be shared and understood so that perspective can be met is where that needs comes from. Shane Rudall was someone who filled that role most recently in the agricultural seat. He was Chestnuts.
He was
Filberts, excuse me, farmer.
Okay, that's our primary crop too, so
Okay.
not a whole lot different, but
Yes, but he had a nice perspective to share on sort of activities that were, and really interesting to us too, because that's a side of things that we don't always have as much familiarity with, even from LRAPA's perspective, because we don't regulate it. So our knowledge base on what a lot of those items can be isn't as in-depth as it is over like a regulation of permitted sources. So that is, I think, would be a nice perspective to have on the CAC. And diversify the perspective, kind of to James' point that he made earlier, where there's a lot of industry presence on the CAC, but having diversity in the perspective that's shared has a lot of value.
awesome, yeah.
Anybody else online like to bring up a question? All right, I'll plunge back in. What's your familiarity with the agency?
I'm familiar with like some of that it kind of regulates like industry a little bit more than like the broader community so much, but makes like recommendations for like it kind of puts restraints on like when burning can happen,
So
right?
outdoor burning.
Outdoor burning.
Yeah, that's one aspect.
And monitors air quality and like develops regulations and sort of like how to improve air quality for our local county. And I think I would appreciate like a little bit. I would need to gain familiarity in like what the exact tools are for getting those net, but
We don't require any sort of internet knowledge. You'll pick that up.
That's what
Over time. But yeah, LRAPA is unique in Oregon. Other states have localized air jurisdictions like LRAPA has, but you got EPA that passes regulations and then it's implemented at state level by the Department of Environmental Quality. And then DEQ designates authority to LRAPA for Lane County.
Gotcha. So some counties don't have like an LRAPA.
Nobody else in Oregon does.
Oh,
If you go
wow.
to California
Okay.
or Oregon, they almost exclusively do. So that's a little different.
Gotcha.
There were two other air agencies in Oregon that exist, one around the Dalles, and then another one was, I think, Lynn and Benton County. They shared an air agency, but both of those have since, it was back in like the 70s and 80s that those went away.
The field burning area.
Yeah, El Rapa is the only one that's left. And I think broadly, the way to describe what El Rapa's role is we implement the Clean Air Act in Lane County. So the Clean Air Act, the federal government has said, we have these health standards that we want to make sure that we're meeting. And so that they pass that authority down to the state, and then that authority gets passed down once more to the local. The state can't be less stringent than the federal government, and the county government can't be less strict than the state government. El Rapa's regulations, we try to be well aligned with DEQ in terms of how strict we are, especially when it comes to the permitting of regulated sources, because it can be really challenging if in one parts of the state, the rules in terms of industry, what you can and cannot do are quite a bit different than from the state. But we do have more stringent rules in the sense that essentially there are more businesses that have to essentially say, hey, El Rapa, we exist and we do create air pollution to some degree, and we need to let you know that we exist. We have a deeper threshold of that FYI to us than what DEQ does on a state level. So we're not necessarily regulating those businesses per se, but there's an expectation that they at the very least let us know that they exist. So that way we can keep our hands a little bit more closer in terms of relationships with those businesses. And really it comes down to we implement programs in Lane County to protect air quality. So one of those programs are issuing state permits or issuing federal permits if it's a Title V sources. Another program is our outdoor burning program, where we say it's a good day for doing your outdoor burn, or it's a day where the air quality is really stagnant, not moving around, so it's not a good day for doing the outdoor burn. And home with heating programs. So in the more populated areas like the Eugene Springfield area, people who use their wood stoves, that can be a form of air pollution. And so we set green, yellow, red days on, it's a good day to use your wood stove. It's a day where we ask you don't, but you can if you need to. And then a red day where that's visible emissions are prohibited. And another aspect of El Rapa too, that I would say in the last few years, since about 2019, we've started and have been embracing more fully, is trying to bring grant funding to the state to work on air quality issues. We run a grant up in Oak Ridge that's essentially a wood stove swap out program to take old, dirtier burning wood stoves to install newer, cleaner ones, as well as do other things like install ductless heat pumps. So that way people have a different form of heat besides burning wood. And that's kind of a all around sort of quick and dirty of El Rapa. And I think one of the values of the CAC is when there aren't projects that the board has assigned in terms of like, hey, work on this item or reflect on this thing and provide a recommendation back to the board. It is open for CAC members to say, I'm curious about this topic. Can we receive information about this topic from El Rapa? Can we get a presentation about this, that, or the other? And we engage in that way too with the CAC.
I like that. Yeah, it's collaborative.
Yeah, that's the intent for sure.
Yeah, we loosely follow Robert's rules, especially with official things, such as about whether or not to refer you.
Yeah.
But in general, it's a collaborative effort. And then the board is more formal. Yeah. So, all right, anything else from the folks online? Are we ready to vote? I'm seeing nods. Would you like to step out and?
Yeah, I'm happy to.
We can do this
Whatever
pretty
your
quick.
preference.
I mean, do you want to stay for the rest of the meeting as an observer?
I mean, if I'm invited, I would.
Well, yeah,
gladly
you're
stay,
welcome to. We just have you step outside the
Sure,
door
yeah.
here for a few minutes
Yeah.
while we vote, and then we'll
I can,
call you back.
I'll just hang out and I'll watch and.
Okay.
If Jimmy, you want to lead that?
Sure. All right, so do we have any discussion about the interview candidate?
I appreciate Travis bringing up the point that it appears that we have an open seat with the agricultural community, so that seems to be a nice nexus.
Yeah, that's been a tough one to fill historically, so it's nice to have someone directly involved with agriculture interested.
Hasn't that seat been open for, I think, over a year now?
Yeah, probably around that. And we've gone many years in the past, so it's been tough to fill. Not that that needs to color our decision, but I feel like he's a good candidate. All right, so if we are ready to vote on that, I'd entertain a motion.
I call the question. I move for a vote on approval of this candidate.
Do we have a second?
I would second.
All right, so all in favor of referring Ben Larson to the board for filling the CAC agriculture seat. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that looks unanimous and we have a quorum, so that's official. All right. Thank you. So moving on then, we have the board meeting overview. So March is when the budget committee meets with the board. I was delayed for the meeting, so I missed a few things, but Evelina, you've been approved for another 3-year term.
Thank you.
Coming out of the budget committee meeting, there was a request for a passage of a supplemental budget, which was approved. Was that any big deal? Discussion.
The supplemental budget was about a 3% change to what was initially approved back in last spring. Supplemental budgets is kind of a normal yearly thing that we do where the budget's a projection of how much we're going to spend, and then when we start to get close to hitting that line and we think that we need a little more breathing room, so to speak, we go to the board. Under Oregon law, if it's over 10% of a change, we have to bring the entire budget committee together. The budget committee has to approve it. Our change, it was just a change to the general fund and it was a 3% change. So we did not need the full budget committee approval. However, at the most recent budget committee meeting, which was earlier this month, we reviewed the supplemental budget with them. We didn't need their permission by Oregon law, but we felt it was important that they were included in that conversation. That went on to the board and the board adopted that. So we do have a supplemental budget that was passed in March. Now we are, actually this morning, a manager meeting that we had was very focused on our budgets because we're now in budget season. So the April meeting, the budget committee will meet. We will review the proposed budget. Then the next step beyond that is the budget committee will adopt or approve that budget, excuse me. And then once the budget committee approves the budget, we go into a public hearing or we go into public comment period where the budget is put out for public notice for a 30-day period. So the public can comment. We publish in what's called an LB1 form in a local paper. So it would be published in the Register Guard. And then probably will end up being in June, we will be holding a public hearing on the budget for the board to then potentially adopt the budget, which we are by Oregon requirements have to have adopted by June 30th at the very latest.
Okay, thank you. I should take a step back. Didn't mean to. So there was a unanimous vote to refer your application to the board. So the board meeting will be April 11th. Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, so in the past, candidates have attended the board meeting. It's not a requirement, so you could if you wish.
I think when Heather, as our board coordinator, she's getting ready for our April meeting and sending out all this stuff, she'll include you on that email. And you can attend the board meeting. The board sometimes will have questions, depends on really how packed the meeting is. If it's a busy meeting, usually they're like, great, we trust the CAC's recommendation, and then we will just move forward on that. If it's a little bit more breathing room in the meeting, sometimes they'll like to ask a question or two. Your participation is not required, so it's totally up to you if you want to be there or not. But Heather will keep you in the loop. And if you want to join in person, it'll actually be at Springfield City Hall because it's a budget committee meeting. We don't have enough meeting space here to facilitate that large of a group, but there's also a Zoom virtual component to it as well. So you can just join virtually also.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. And so what I started to do was just give a review of the last board meeting. So at this point now, the other thing was Title 47, open burning rules. The comment period on that rule ended that day of the meeting in early March. There's a public hearing with no comments from the public. So let's see, so that,
So so the process on the Title 47, so I actually described earlier the authority as it exists with the federal government, the state government, and then the local government. So the board adopted our rule changes to 47, which was to add a definition of a burn barrel, which was absent from our Title 47, as well as to provide outdoor burning opportunities for lull during the winter months, which before the rule change, they were limited to the fall and spring burning season. The next step in the process is it gets forward on, we actually did receive a comment. Nobody was there to comment orally, but the EPA did comment on our rulemaking with some feedback. So we will be incorporating that feedback into our supporting documents that basically say that if this rule change happens, the additional burning from lull will not create a problem with the national ambient air quality standards. So we have paperwork that basically, from a math engineering perspective, demonstrates that this is not a concern. And so they had some feedback on that document to support that. We'll incorporate that feedback into that document. It goes to the Environmental Quality Commission, which is the state level version of our board of directors. They are meeting in May. And so at the May meeting, the EQC will look at that changes to our Title 47. They will either approve it or not. We're anticipating that they will approve it, at which point then it gets forwarded on to the federal government to be published in the Code of Federal Register, because Title 47 is considered a state implementation plan rule because it regulates particulate matter or regulates activities connected to particulate matter. So it is in the state implementation plan, which means the federal government has to concur on those changes. And that's where they look at our documentation that says this is not going to create a problem with the national ambient air quality standards. And so long as we have that paperwork in order, they will approve it, and then that will take effect later this year. So that's that process. A lot of paperwork and bureaucracy essentially for some local change. And there's one of the things that I think El Rapa as a benefit to the local community is if Lowell wanted to make that change, they would have to engage with Salem to make that change. And I think that engaging with us is a little bit easier to facilitate their desires to have that flexibility.
the board did talk a little bit about burn barrels. There's some questioning of what's so bad about burn barrels, if I could nutshell it. And the answer is airflow and
People like, it's harder to judge what's in a barrel when it's a burn barrel. So from a understanding if people are burning prohibited materials, it's very difficult to make that assessment if someone's doing a burn barrel. And it is common that prohibited materials can be burned in burn barrels like trash and other things. And that is why in Lane County's rules, they're not permitted.
well, I don't know. My recollection when this first came up, Morrissey, especially when the inspectors had an issue with airflow as far as hot combustion. You really need that airflow, and most people don't put holes in the bottom of the burn barrel to get that airflow going. I think a lot of the use is just because it's tradition.
Yeah.
All right, let's see. So, and then the agency brought forward a proposal to make a public comment on a pending rule on air curtain incinerators. I don't know if, I forget, the board approved that.
They did,
so
yep.
the staff will be preparing a statement that'll go to, is that EPA?
The EPA. So there's a rule that is open right now. Actually, it closed on the 25th, which we did submit that comment to the EPA. And the rules that are open for public comment by the EPA are focused on large municipal waste combustion units. But an aspect of that rule is applicable to air curtain incinerators, which under current rules, air curtain incinerators are considered to be subject to Title V requirements, meaning big sources of air pollution regulations. And many air curtains are small. Basically, envision a dumpster with a fan and a curtain of air over the top of it that encourages free burning of particulate matter. And it's an efficient tool to dispose of woody debris through burning it and creating less emissions. But El Rapa's perspective, and this was explained in our comment, is that the current regulatory framework is overburdensome and it discourages the use of air curtain incinerators. And so it was a request to the EPA to consider some changes that would remove some of these burdens and allow air curtain incinerators to be used more in not only just in Lane County, but more broadly, because they are a tool that I think can create efficient combustion, but at the moment requires Title V level permitting, which we feel is overburdensome and cumbersome and diminishes people's interest and willingness to use them as an efficient way to dispose of woody yard debris.
Okay. And I think that's a wrap for the board meeting. Okay, so we're ready to pick up again the draft, second draft of the application form. Did you all get a chance to see that when it was sent out earlier? And are there any comments? Looks like Paul's ready to go. Or do you have a question on the board meeting?
If I may, I had a question back on the matter of the burn barrels.
Yeah.
You know, I've seen a lot of like do-it-yourself YouTube videos and some commercial products that are available now that are smokeless burn barrels. You know, they incorporate secondary combustion air. Is that something that El Rapa recognizes or has any role or treats any different than just the standard 55-gallon drum with the trash thrown in it?
That's a good question.
I think that would be that would come down to kind of an enforcement determination, which on some of those things can be a little bit of a gray area. I would think that if it was just a barrel, even if it was potentially this newer technology, could be perceived or understood to be a burn barrel, at which point we would say that this is not something that is allowed. And even if it was, because it kind of sounds like, as you describe it, Paul, that there almost is a component of where it is a small air curtain incinerator, because the air curtain incinerator is essentially an enclosed area with air, a fan blowing air across the top to encourage that secondary combustion.
Yeah, my son's actually made one of these.
Oh.
It's like a double wall tub,
Mhm.
and the inner wall is perforated. And then I think there's perforations around the top. So when it burns, you get good airflow and hotter, more complete combustion. So I just wonder if that's ever come up with enforcement of it, if that is considered a burn barrel.
Not that I'm familiar with, but that would be one of those enforcement discretion items where, depending on the specific setup and what it is and what it looked like and how it was being used, where that determination would be made. But that's a good question, and I'm not familiar enough specifically with all of those things to say one way or the other, but I don't believe we have had any enforcement interaction with something like that.
Chris, have you come across anything with that?
Yeah, and I missed the first part of the question. I apologize, but I think it had to do with different variations of burn devices out there and whether they're considered burn barrels or not. As far as forestry statutes are related, it has to do with more than the device itself. It has to do with fire, you know, the potential for fire escape. It has nothing to do with emissions, so it's a little bit different nexus.
Yeah, I just wonder if there's something with regard to that that's already had some fire potential rules.
No, and we've gotten away as primary practice just because, as somebody mentioned earlier, they're just nasty devices, and they smudge the air, and unfortunately they usually have bad things thrown in them. So we don't issue permits for burn barrels, even when we are kind of in the permit realm. And I say we, Lane County is different than most places, but Most counties that I'm aware of in the state, as far as related to forestry, don't even issue barrel permits anymore because they're just not good. So
Yeah. All right. Well, I wonder if this would be a potential item for us to take up, and it might be the enforcement side could use some clarity with that.
Well, it kind of sounds like you were saying, Jim, I think you said it was your son made one, and it's a double wall burn barrel with introduces preheated secondary combustion air.
Yeah, you
and
said it
it's
better than I did.
pretty effective at reducing the emissions to practically nothing. And I'd hate to think some creative engineering type person's coming up with something and then it falls in some kind of regulatory gray area. But it does sound like, from what you were saying, Travis, people may be doing this, but if so, they're doing it so effectively, there's no complaints and hence no enforcement actions. And that sounds pretty good.
Yeah, we are complaint driven a lot of times when it comes to at least something like that would be enforcement can be through inspections and things that we do on a routine basis. So I don't want to say complaint driven in terms of enforcement, but on something like that. And to kind of Jim's point, I do think it's very reasonable if the CAC, because this is something that if it's a newer thing that people are doing, it's on YouTube, people know that this is something that could be created. Exploring this from a CAC perspective to provide some recommendations or some information that we as an agency and our enforcement department can be better informed upon. So that way, if there is a future situation where we encounter someone who is using something like this because there's a complaint or whatever the case may be, we have information and we have knowledge within the organization that the CAC helped to make us aware of by bringing that information to us that could be helpful in those potential situations. So I think there's some validity in exploring this and putting together some information that LRAPA internally can have as a resource.
Yeah, well, and anytime I've seen them, they've been used on a patio, like a chimney or something.
Oh, okay.
Where you just have
More recreational kind of.
more recreational, which I know there are a few rules around that. So that might be something to look into, or maybe even recreational fires in general, to see if any clarity is needed for enforcement. Okay. Well, we'll put a pin in that. Gosh. Oh, yeah, interview. Our application and interview process, back to that. We got about 10 minutes to go, but we have a second draft of the application. Does anybody have any comments after reviewing that? Any changes to suggest? Yeah, Peter?
Yeah, I want to say two things. The suggestion I made last time we reviewed this was incorporated and looks really good. And the other is kind of a real minor nitpicky thing. It's kind of like that red star after every question. I know in some of the fields, everybody knows that means required field, but maybe somebody doesn't. I don't see anywhere towards the bottom of the page or elsewhere on the document that the red little asterisk is defined as required response.
Yeah, I think we can add that note there. I think in the form feature on our website, the actual like software we use to make the form, as I'm thinking about it, I think there's a place that we could make that more clear. So that way people know that the star designates that this is something where you have to answer this before it'll let you submit the form to us. So yeah, I think we can explore that and correct that.
Were there any blanks that aren't required response?
There was a couple, yeah. I think, I don't recall specifically, but I think that there was a couple where it wasn't some of the contact information, you didn't have to provide all of that, but some of it was, but not all of it.
So if you didn't fill that out and tried to send it in, would it kick back to you?
If I think that if you don't have all of the asterisk stars filled out with answers, the submit button it's grayed out, so it won't even let you like submit it unless you have those items.
That can be frustrating if you don't notice the stars and know what they mean.
Yeah.
Thanks, Peter. Anything else? Do we feel like it's finished product other than that? I forget, did we decide we need the board approval for that or just to show it to them and say this is what we're rolling with?
I think that, it was more of a, this is what the CAC thinks would be good and helpful to the CAC, and so a FYI to the board is probably appropriate, but I don't know if it necessarily needs their kind of green light, so to speak.
Would you be able to make that one change over the asterisks in terms of the board meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think just going by consensus then, with that one change, we'll call it done. Does anybody disagree with that? Okay. All right, well, we have some time then. Do we want to talk about interview questions? Any? Kelly had that one list. I think it would have been helpful to bring that back. Actually, it'd be helpful to have Kelly here too. We could table that part of it.
You know, I was looking for her list online. I don't see it. So,
Seems like, did we made a few notes to that previously.
Yes, I remember last time we met, we hadn't gotten through all of the questions in terms of
Yeah.
what we wanted to still review. I think it was like the last three that we had yet to really touch base on to see if we were agreement of those questions or not. But if there is no real thoughts or perspectives from everyone here on wanting to reflect on this further.
I think you'd probably agree we're a little bit hesitant and stumbly with the interview process. I'd like things to be a little smoother.
Yeah, it's kind of complex with like the different fields that you're trying to ask about though. So yeah, I can see that being tricky to come up with one set.
A thought that I did have, if I can offer something, when we were talking about this is, I think that the last time we discussed, there was this thought that all of the questions we would want to ask in an interview should just be on the actual interview
Yeah, that's true.
itself, so that way people have the opportunity to answer. And then when it comes to what does that in-person interview or during the meeting interview, does the CAC then kind of go through those questions again? Or is what's more valuable potentially just a discussion with that individual or that applicant to get a sense of their demeanor, their interest in participating, their willingness to engage and open and share their thoughts and perspectives? Because one of the things about being on the CAC is you need to, there's a component of being willing to speak up and offer your thoughts and perspectives and opinion. You know, that is kind of an important component of being on the CAC.
Yeah, well, and another option would be to, if we did have additional questions, to provide them to the applicant ahead of time. So
Oh, that's true too,
they
yeah.
have a sense of how they'd like to answer. We're not trying to do any gotcha, but I feel like there's some questions we could ask that would fill out the process more. So, well, how about this? I'll make this suggestion. Why don't we plan to take up that aspect of it next time when Kelly can attend and let her refine that list, and we'll put it out again so that we all have it fresh in our minds so we can talk it over a little bit more. But otherwise, I think we're about run our course on this issue.
So then for the board meeting in April, what we will provide in our documentation to the board will just be those actual application questions that are on the website that are now updated. If the CAC is agreeable to it, I don't believe we need to have the board to give the green light. We can just make the switch and that just now be the questions that we have hosted on our site, and I could do that kind of this week.
You think the board would be okay with that?
There's nothing in our titles or in our rules that explicitly outline that is the order of operation. So I think that from a CAC, that's something where if you're feeling comfortable enough that you are ready to just make that switch and have those be the questions, and I think we can do that. if the CAC would prefer to just wait and let the board have an opportunity to look at them and then potentially have something to say one way or the other, that's another approach. I think that's a decision for the CAC to make. There's nothing in our titles or IGA or anything that would require that.
Well, I guess my thought is I'm often surprised by details that the board will pick up on and ask about. And I think maybe I'd be more comfortable holding off making it live till they have a chance to throw those left field things at me.
Okay.
But I should be able to answer them if we provide a copy to them, and then I'll be prepared to answer questions.
Okay, so we'll hold off on making that go live on our page, but we'll have the new questions provided to the board with their board packet information. And then depending on that feedback or lack thereof, following that, we can then make it go live.
Right.
Okay.
Anybody disagree with that, Teresa?
Oh, this isn't disagreeing. I was just wanting to say that I liked the piece in the interview today around doing an overview of the committee, an overview of of LARAPA, and having it be an opportunity for people like everyone involved to ask questions and understand what you're actually volunteering for. Like that seems like a helpful part of the interview for a citizen advisory committee.
Thank you. All right, well, we'll go to the board then with the new application form and we'll go from there. Okay, well, we have time for a roundtable. Oh, I'm going to go ahead and start off because I do have something that maybe should have been on the agenda, but my term expires in April. So I had a lot going on, and I only this morning got around to filling out an application and submitting it on the old application. I'm thinking since it expires in April, there's not a problem to slip into May a little bit. So we could put it on the agenda for our next April meeting that we do the official vote for renewing my membership. So Evelina is renewed. Paul, I believe your term is expiring and you need to reapply. I want to say yours may expire in April, or it might have been March, I forget. It's on the website. Can somebody check that real quick? So it's a 3-year term. And they're very open to renewing applications, but you have to take that formality.
Okay.
Maybe you'll be the first one to use the new application. It does have to go through the committee first, though. All right, well, we'll get that figured out. I think that's everything I had for roundtable. I'll just go around the screen here. March. Oh, yeah. So Paul, this is your last official month as a member. So you'll want to maybe go ahead and fill out the old application. We'll look at it in April and refer you to the board for approval in May. And I don't think anybody's going to get picky about that.
Okay.
And I don't think anybody else is close except Kelly is in the summer sometime. Okay, so on with roundtable. Teresa, anything? All right, Paul?
I don't have anything.
Okay, Peter?
No, nothing for roundtable.
Chris?
I don't think I do either. Willing to take questions, but you know, we're still raining and we don't have any no wildfire smoke or burning issues on the horizon. Knock on wood.
Speaking of applications and whatnot, you had mentioned you're up for a change. Is anything new there?
Yeah, I'm filling in Salem, and so different job duties. That's going to extend through the calendar year. So it was a 4-month deal, supposed to be over this month. It's going to extend through the year. So yeah, it's right. This is actually one of the few things that I'm trying to hold on to because I care a lot about it. So it might become to the point where it's an untenable workload for me with my other schedule. because I'll be in charge of statewide response. So it might get to the point where, and I don't know how as a committee, you know, we want to handle that. If I have somebody, the person filling in for me fills in on this, you know, I'm not sure, but I will try to stay engaged as best I can. And then if it becomes a problem, I'll let you folks know. And
Okay, well, we'll trust you to make that call, but
call
we
an
sure,
audible, but yeah.
well, we sure appreciated your input and participation. Evelina,
I do actually have a question for Chris. During the last meeting, Chris, you mentioned that we are officially in drought. Did you say that, or am I imagining?
You know, I don't recall saying that, but strangely enough, we were. I have I've got quick access. I've got that stuff bookmarked. I can I'll just be quiet for a second while we continue the roundtable. I'll look real quick, but yeah, there's a national drought monitor. You can probably Google it. It's a federal site. They have really good statistical data. They usually update it a couple times a month.
Okay. I was just curious, how do you foresee, I guess, the fire danger this summer? Or do you see any higher risk than normal, or?
There we go. I had already jumped to my other screen. So yeah, it's I'm looking at the drought monitor right now, and we're in a better spot than we were. Lane County last year, we were in, I'm looking for the label. We were in, I think, moderate to extreme. I'm not seeing the there we go. Yeah, we were in moderate to extreme going into fire season, and now we're normal for the Willamette Valley. And we are in abnormally dry to moderate drought from Klamath Falls, basically the east slope of the Cascades. So from Klamath Falls up through the Dalles, the entire stretch of Oregon, the center stretch of Oregon, and then up in Wallowa County, extreme northeast Oregon. But locally, we're looking better. It is all dependent upon. It's not just what happens, where we're at right now. Really, the lead-in months, so May and June, really make or break what the local fire season is. The rain that we get in those 2 months really just has a very appreciable effect on the fuel conditions. So what I would say is, based on the historical pattern, yeah, we will have a potentially severe fire season. Ever since 2013, there's been this extreme uptick on starts, number of starts, acres burnt, you know, just the across the gambit, and very, very worrisome. I would go as far as saying, my professional opinion, Lane County is starting to burn like Douglas County used to. Douglas County is kind of like Jackson and Josephine County. Just the whole thing it feels like it has progressed its way north across the landscape, picking up much more, you know, many more fires that we didn't used to get in Western Oregon, even north of Lane County. So yeah, it appears to be a changing landscape. If it's cyclical and we swing back to a wet, that'd be fantastic. That'd be great. But I would suspect that we will have another robust fire season.
And I can offer some perspectives too, mostly from my meteorological background, but also some observations that I'd say in my role here at El Rapa since I've joined. Is in 2022, as an example, we had a very, very wet spring to the point where outdoor burning, which under outdoor burning, there's two authorities. There's El Rapa's authority, which we regulate the smoke. So if the smoke's going to lift, we'll allow outdoor burning. If the smoke's going to stay at the surface of the earth, we won't allow it. But there's also a component to that of permission or authority that comes from the fire district or even ODF too on that as well. And that's from a fire danger, fire safety perspective. And in 2022, by rule, outdoor burning season, the spring season closes June 15th. Most years, the fire safety concern curtails the season early, but in 2022, we went all the way to June 15th before the season closed by rule. But then we had lots of spring growth because it was wet. And then as we got into the fall, because of just a general warmer climate, winter doesn't quite arrive quite as soon as it might once have in those spring rains. So then wildfire season was able to, when it did start, extend into late October because that fall going into the following year was a bit on the dry side as well. So it's a a wet springs are really important, but then two, when does the moisture arrive at the later end of the year to sort of signal the end of wildfire season is another component to that as well. And hopefully we see wetter falls in addition to our wetter springs, yes.
Paul had a question.
Paul?
Hey, yeah, I was curious, for you, Chris, after the ice storm, I just observed, around in low-lying areas, a lot of excessive fuels lying on the ground from the ice damaging the trees. From your point of view, is that really significant for overall wildfire risk, or is that just a very limited, localized phenomenon?
Both, I do think it's significant, and we saw the same thing after the 2019 snowstorm. That was more widespread. Luckily, I believe that the ice damage, though significant, was localized enough. In the big picture of fire threat, I don't think it's going to be, an appreciable burden to the system. But I mean, if we have fires down low in the valley where the ice seemed to accumulate, have fires in those areas, it will absolutely have an effect, both from access as well as fire intensity should a fire start.
Mm-hmm. It just strikes me, just looking around the surroundings, that a lot of that fuel that's down on the ground, it's also in the low-lying areas where if we get the, inversion going on, that's where it gets worse, is the low-lying areas. So, well, we will see.
Thank you, Chris and Travis, for answering so many questions and providing such a useful information. It's a hot topic, as we all know, for the past few years. So.
All right, well, thanks, everybody. Unless there's anything else, I'll adjourn the meeting.
Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Think about these